The echoes of laughter still clung to the glass walls of Weston Industries long after the annual corporate gala had ended. Crystal chandeliers shimmered like frozen rain above the marble floor, and the faint scent of champagne and perfume lingered in the air. Elena Brooks moved silently through the vast hall, her rubber-soled shoes whispering across the floor as she gathered empty glasses and folded linen napkins. She'd volunteered for the late cleanup shift, like she always did. Every extra hour meant another few dollars to send home to her father, whose health and spirit had both withered after her mother's death. She'd once dreamed of teaching literature, of standing in front of a classroom filled with young minds hungry for stories. But dreams didn't pay overdue rent, or the electric bill, or the monthly therapy her father refused to attend. Reality had stripped her of poetry and left her with practicality. Across the room, near the main banquet table, four young men lingered, arrogant, loud, and wrapped in tailored suits that cost more than Elena earned in a month. Their laughter rang sharp against the polished glass walls. Elena recognized one of them immediately. Adrian Weston, the heir to Weston Industries, the son of the man whose name gleamed on the building's steel plaque. He leaned back in his chair with careless grace, his cufflinks catching the light as his friends poured another round of whiskey. You saw how that waitress tried to flirt for tips. One of them sneered, slurring slightly. She looked like she'd sell her soul for a 20. Another laughed. I got it on video. I'll post it later. Call it How the Other Half Begs. It'll go viral. Adrian's smirk deepened. Don't act surprised. He said lazily, some people are born desperate. You can't blame them for trying. Their laughter grew louder, crueler. Too bad your dad wasn't around to see the fun. One of them added mockingly. He's probably asleep dreaming about stock projections. The man's a genius, sure, but the most boring genius alive. Adrian gave a slow, amused shrug, and one of the others leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You know what would be funny? Your old man's big 60th birthday party tomorrow night, full of investors, board members, all the gray-haired dinosaurs. What if you showed up with the worst possible date imaginable? Someone so ridiculous the old man would choke on his cigar. Another raised his glass. I'll throw in 10 grand if you actually do it. Make it 20, said a third, grinning. 3 hands extended across the table, each one dripping with money and mischief. 20,000, one of them declared, if you show up with a train wreck date and survive the night. Adrian hesitated just long enough for the others to lean in, and then that familiar spark of arrogant thrill flashed in his eyes. He clinked their glasses one by one. Deal. From across the room, Elena froze mid-step, the stem of a wine glass snapping between her trembling fingers. She'd heard everything. Her breath quickened. She bent to pick up the shards, but her shaking hands betrayed her. One plate slipped from the stack and shattered against the floor. The sound cracked through the empty room, like a gunshot. For pairs of eyes turned toward her. Well, would you look at that? One of them jeered. Perfect timing. The ideal disaster. Perfect loser. Another added. Their laughter erupted again, bouncing off marble and glass until it felt like it was inside her head. Adrian raised his hand, silencing them with a look. He studied her the way a cat studies a mouse. It's already cornered. What's your name? She swallowed hard. Elena! Elena, he repeated slowly, rolling the name across his tongue as if testing how it felt to own it. Be in my office tomorrow morning at 9 sharp. Her pulse faltered. Sir. He leaned forward, smiling like a man who already owned her fear. Don't make me repeat myself. You'll be at my disposal for the day. Then he stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and turned to his friends. Gentlemen, get your wallets ready. This is going to be the easiest 20 grand I've ever earned. They left laughing, the echo of their mockery clinging to the air long after they disappeared down the corridor. Elena knelt in silence, her reflection broken into pieces across the marble. She didn't cry. Not here. Not where the security cameras might catch her weakness. When the last shard was swept away, she rose on trembling legs and whispered to herself, "One more night. Just one more, and then I'll leave this place behind." But fate, as always, had other plans. The next morning dawned gray and cold, Chicago's skyline fading into a haze of fog. Elena stood outside Weston Industries, clutching her worn canvas bag. Her shift wasn't supposed to start until 8, but she had arrived an hour early. Sleep had refused to come. Inside, tension hummed like a live wire. The usually warm lobby felt colder, the employees quieter. As Elena wheeled her cleaning cart toward the elevators, a woman stumbled out, mascara streaked, clutching a box of personal belongings. Elena recognized her, Laura Pierce, a junior accountant who had been at the gala last night. "She's gone," a receptionist whispered. "Mr. Weston Sr. fired her this morning. Apparently, there's a video going around." Elena's stomach dropped. In the distance, raised voices echoed from the corridor near the executive offices. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" thundered Charles Weston, Adrian's father, the founder and CEO, his voice carrying the full force of authority. "My board is laughing at me because my son thinks he's the master of a circus." Adrian's tone was smooth, almost lazy. "You're overreacting, Dad. It was a harmless joke." "A joke." Charles slammed his palm against the desk. "A young woman's dignity was dragged through the mud because of you. You think that's leadership?" "She did it for money," Adrian replied coolly. "People always do." Charles's voice cut like steel. "You will not embarrass this family again. Tonight is my 60th birthday, and if you so much as breathe the word bet, you'll wish you hadn't." A long silence followed. Then Adrian's voice again, quieter. "Sure, Dad. Whatever you say." Moments later, Charles stormed out, the door swinging open. Elena flattened herself against the wall as he passed, the air thick with tension and cologne. She was about to leave when a sharp voice stopped her. "You," Adrian said from behind the glass. "Come in." Elena hesitated, then stepped inside. His office gleamed with power, floor-to-ceiling windows, dark mahogany furniture, and an arrogance that filled every inch of space. "Punctual," Adrian said, leaning back in his chair. "Good. We have an event tonight. You'll accompany me." Her breath caught. "Sir, please." "I don't want to." He stood, circling the desk, stopping just close enough for her to feel the heat of his cologne. "You will. Or you'll find yourself unemployed before lunch." Elena froze. The thought of her father's empty fridge, the unpaid rent, the rehab bills, she couldn't afford defiance. "What do you need me to do?" she whispered. Adrian smiled. "Just be yourself. The rest will take care of itself." He pressed a wad of cash into her palm. "Buy something decent. And don't run." A tall man in a black suit appeared at the door. The driver, silent, imposing. Half an hour later, Elena stood in a luxury boutique surrounded by silk and sequins. The driver waited outside, watching through the glass. She could have chosen the flashiest gown, the boldest color, but instead, she chose a deep emerald green dress, elegant and simple. It didn't scream for attention. It spoke with quiet strength. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Not a servant, not a joke, a woman who would make them remember her. The rain had begun to fall by late afternoon, a soft drizzle veiling the skyline as Elena Brooks rode in the back of Adrian Weston's black sedan. The driver said nothing. He simply stared straight ahead, his gloved hands motionless on the wheel. The city blurred past in streaks of gray and gold, the glow of streetlights bending through raindrops on the glass. Elena sat quietly, her fingers twisting in her lap. The emerald green dress she'd chosen earlier clung lightly to her frame, elegant but modest. She'd pinned her hair up in a loose twist, the way her mother used to before attending university lectures. It made her feel composed, even if her pulse was racing beneath the calm. The driver pulled into a narrow street lined with boutique restaurants, stopping in front of one with black awnings and warm golden light glowing from within. Adrian was already there, waiting at a corner table near the window. When he saw her, his expression flickered, something unreadable passed through his eyes, brief as lightning. He stood as she entered. "You clean up well," he said, forcing his usual smirk. "Didn't think you had it in you." Elena's voice was steady. "I did what you asked. I'm here." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Good. Sit." The waiter appeared instantly, pouring wine that cost more than her monthly rent. Adrian leaned back, studying her with detached amusement. "You're nervous?" he observed. "No," she said softly. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" She met his gaze without flinching. "Why someone like you needs to humiliate someone like me to feel powerful." The air shifted, quiet, tense, electric. For a moment, Adrian's mask slipped. Then he laughed, though the sound was hollow. "You think too much. It's just a game." "A game?" Elena's voice sharpened, slightly. "You ruin people for entertainment. Is that what privilege does to the soul? Turns it into an audience for cruelty." His hand stilled on the glass. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that, especially not by someone he saw as beneath him. "Careful," he murmured. "You're one step away from losing your job." "I already lost my dignity," she replied quietly. "What's left to lose?" Something in her calm defiance unsettled him. He looked away, jaw tightening. "You're lucky my father doesn't know about this. He'd fire you himself." "He knows," Elena said before she could stop herself. Adrian's head snapped up. "What?" "I heard him yelling at you this morning." He was disappointed, furious, even. "You can call this a game if it helps you sleep at night, but deep down, you're terrified he's right about you." His expression darkened, the smooth veneer cracking. "You don't know anything about me." "Maybe not," she said, "but I see the kind of man you're trying not to become." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the quiet patter of rain against the glass. Finally, Adrian exhaled, his voice low. "You think you've got me figured out?" "No," Elena replied softly. "I think you're still trying to figure yourself out." He almost smiled at that, a small, unguarded twitch of the lips. "You have a sharp tongue for a janitor." "I have a degree in English literature," she said simply. "I just don't use it where anyone can see." Adrian blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected that. "Then what are you doing here?" "Paying bills, feeding my father, keeping the lights on." Her tone was flat, factual, without pity. Adrian looked down at his glass. "When I was 12, my mother died," he said suddenly. "My father buried himself in work and tried to bury me with him. Every day since, I've been measured by his standards, his expectations. It's like living under a microscope. One mistake and you're nothing." Elena's voice softened. "So you make other people feel small to remind yourself you're not." He glanced up, caught off guard by her accuracy. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes, something human. Then he blinked it away. "Don't psychoanalyze me," he muttered. "Tonight you're my date, not my therapist." She leaned back, folding her hands neatly on the table. "Fine. Let's get this over with." Hours later, the ballroom at the top of Weston Tower glowed like a crown suspended over the city. The 60th birthday gala for Charles Weston was the event of the year. The city's elite, politicians, investors, executives, had gathered under a canopy of chandeliers that bathed the room in golden light. A live orchestra played soft jazz while waiters moved gracefully among the guests, refilling crystal flutes and delivering canapes. Adrian arrived with Elena at his side. She stepped through the grand doors, her heels clicking softly on the marble, her posture tall but unassuming. Conversations faltered briefly as heads turned. "Relax," Adrian murmured beside her. "You look fine." She gave a tight smile. "I wasn't nervous until you said that." They moved through the crowd, and to Elena's astonishment, no one laughed. No one sneered. Instead, whispers of admiration trailed after her. "Who's she?" one woman murmured. "Striking, isn't she?" another whispered. "Elegant, understated." It wasn't mockery, she felt. It was intrigue. A silver-haired man approached, his smile polished and kind. "Adrian, my boy," he said warmly. "And who is this charming young woman?" "Elena Brooks," Adrian replied, his voice catching ever so slightly. "A pleasure, Miss Brooks," the man said, taking her hand. "You have remarkable poise. I do hope we'll see more of you at Weston events." As the man walked away, Elena turned to Adrian, who looked oddly dazed. "What was that?" she asked quietly. He cleared his throat. "That was Senator Wilcox, my father's biggest investor. And he just complimented your date," she said with a faint smirk. "Looks like you're winning." But something in his expression told her he wasn't thinking about the bet anymore. Across the room, Charles Weston watched them from near the bar. His sharp eyes, once filled with irritation, softened slightly. The woman his son had brought, he'd expected someone loud, gaudy, humiliating. Instead, he saw grace, intelligence, and quiet dignity. When Charles finally approached them, Adrian straightened instinctively, like a boy caught misbehaving. "Father," he greeted, his tone formal. "Adrian," Charles replied. Then, turning to Elena, he offered a genuine smile. "Miss Brooks, I must admit my expectations were low after this morning's fiasco. But you've surprised me. You carry yourself beautifully." "Thank you, Mr. Weston," Elena said politely. "And happy birthday." He studied her for a moment, nodding slowly. "I see why he brought you." Those 5 words hit Adrian harder than he expected. For years, he had craved his father's approval, and tonight, for the first time, he had it. But not because of his business acumen or achievements. Because of her. When Charles moved away to greet other guests, Adrian stood silently for a long moment. Elena glanced at him. "You look like someone just rewired your brain." He laughed softly. "You have no idea." The orchestra began playing a slow waltz. Adrian turned to her. "Dance with me." Elena hesitated. "I don't." "You can," he said quietly, extending his hand. "Just follow my lead." She took it. As they moved across the floor, the world seemed to shrink around them. The chatter faded, the music softened, and for the first time that night, they weren't a janitor and an heir. They were simply 2 people moving in rhythm under golden light. Adrian's hand rested gently at her waist. "You're full of surprises, Elena." "So are you," she said, "though I'm still waiting for a good one." He smiled, but there was something wistful behind it. "Maybe tonight's the start." Before she could reply, laughter erupted from near the bar, a sound Elena recognized instantly. Adrian's friends. They staggered toward the dance floor, their suits rumpled, their eyes glinting with mischief and alcohol. "There he is," one of them shouted. "Adrian Weston, the man of the hour." Elena stiffened. The orchestra faltered slightly as the group drew closer. Another friend clapped Adrian on the back, grinning wickedly. "Time for the show, mate. We've been waiting all night. Let's see your grand entrance with your Cinderella." Elena felt every pair of eyes turning toward them. Her throat tightened. Before she could react, one of the men looped his arm around her waist. "Tell us, sweetheart," he slurred. "You polish his floors too?" She jerked back, panic and humiliation flashing across her face. "Let go of me." But he only laughed. "Oh, come on. You're part of the game, aren't you?" And then, suddenly, crash! Adrian shoved the man backward. So hard, he stumbled into a table, sending glasses shattering to the floor. The entire room fell silent. "Don't touch her," Adrian said, his voice low and shaking with fury. His friend blinked in disbelief, half laughing. "What the hell's your problem? You said she was." "I said nothing," Adrian snapped. "Get out." The other men hesitated, looking from him to Charles Weston, whose face had hardened like carved stone across the room. Then, under the weight of silence, they slunk away, muttering curses as security quietly escorted them out. When Adrian turned back, Elena was staring at him, shaken, yes, but composed. "Why," she whispered, "you could have just laughed along." He swallowed, because it stopped being funny. She searched his face for a long moment, then said quietly, "It was never funny, Adrian. You just didn't see it until now." They stood there amid the whispering crowd, two people caught between shame and awakening, the spark of revenge flickering unseen between them. And for the first time since the cruel bet had begun, Adrian Weston realized he'd picked the wrong woman to humiliate because Elena Brooks was about to turn his world inside out. The music resumed after an uneasy silence, but the night had changed. The laughter that had once filled the ballroom had dissolved into cautious murmurs. Guests whispered behind champagne flutes, watching Adrian Weston, the heir who had just publicly turned on his own friends, and the woman standing beside him. Elena Brooks felt every pair of eyes like heat against her skin. She wanted to leave, to disappear back into anonymity. Yet a calm steadiness had replaced her fear. She wasn't the trembling janitor they had mocked in the shadows of marble halls. Not anymore. Adrian leaned close, his voice low. "I'm sorry. For everything." She turned to him slowly. "You don't need to apologize to me. You need to figure out who you are when people aren't watching." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. For once, Adrian Weston, the untouchable son of power, had no clever retort. Charles Weston approached. The crowd instinctively parted to let him through. His expression was unreadable, not fury, but something deeper, heavier. "Adrian," he said, his tone quiet but sharp. "My office." Now, Adrian hesitated, then glanced at Elena. "Stay here, please." She nodded, though part of her wanted to leave before she became part of another scandal. As Adrian followed his father up the marble staircase, dozens of murmuring voices trailed behind him. Elena exhaled and crossed to the balcony that overlooked the city. The night was alive beyond the glass, Chicago glowing like 1,000 small fires reflected in the rain. She pressed her palms to the railing, trying to steady herself. She should have walked away. She should never have come. Yet something inside her whispered that this night was far from over. Upstairs, inside Charles Weston's private study, the tension was thick enough to taste. The older man stood by the window, staring out into the storm. "I warned you," Charles said finally, his voice low. "No more childish stunts. And yet you bring your friends, drunk, vulgar, embarrassing this family in front of every investor I have." Adrian stood rigid near the doorway, guilt simmering under his skin. "I didn't invite them," he said quietly. "They showed up unannounced." Charles turned, eyes narrowing. "Don't insult me with excuses. The press will twist this before dawn. I built this company from nothing, Adrian, nothing, and all I ever asked was for you to take it seriously." "I do take it seriously," Adrian shot back. "But you never gave me a chance to prove that." "You had every chance." Charles thundered. "Every opportunity, every resource. But you squander it trying to prove you're not me." Silence. The rain hit the windows harder now, like a ticking metronome. Finally, Charles sighed and sank into the leather chair behind his desk. Who is she? Adrian blinked. Who? The woman downstairs. Elena Brooks. Adrian hesitated, then spoke. She works in maintenance. She's not like the others. A faint spark of surprise crossed his father's eyes. Maintenance? Yes, Adrian said. She was supposed to be part of a bet. Charles's expression hardened again. You used her? I tried to, Adrian admitted. But I was wrong. She's smarter, stronger than any of them. She doesn't belong cleaning floors. She deserves better. For a long moment, Charles said nothing. Then he leaned back slowly, his gaze distant. I thought I'd raised a fool. Maybe I raised a man, still capable of learning. Adrian frowned. What do you mean? Charles nodded toward the door. Bring her up. I want to meet her properly. When Adrian returned to the ballroom, Elena had already decided to leave. Her heels clicked softly across the marble as she made her way toward the exit. Elena, he called. She turned, and the way he said her name, softer this time, without arrogance, made her pause. My father wants to speak with you. Her brow furrowed. Why? I'm not sure, Adrian said honestly. But please, don't say no. After a moment's hesitation, she followed him. Charles Weston's study was lined with shelves of leather-bound books and framed awards. The smell of oak and tobacco hung faintly in the air. When Elena entered, Charles rose to greet her. Miss Brooks, he said, his voice calm. I owe you an apology, not as a CEO, but as a father. You were humiliated under my roof because of my son's mistake. Elena blinked, stunned. Sir, you don't owe me anything. I do, Charles replied, because the behavior you endured is a reflection of what I failed to teach. Adrian shifted awkwardly beside her. Charles gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Please sit. She did. I've seen people come and go from this company for 35 years. Charles continued. Most are clever. Some are ruthless. But very few carry dignity under pressure. Tonight you did. I didn't do anything, she said quietly. I just tried to survive. That's exactly what impressed me, Charles said. Survival with grace, that's leadership. She didn't know what to say. He leaned forward. Tell me, Miss Brooks, what were you before you came here? I studied English education, she admitted hesitantly. I wanted to teach, but life got in the way. Charles finished for her. It always does. He opened a drawer, took out a sleek silver folder, and slid it across the desk. We're opening a new literacy program through the Weston Foundation. It needs a director, someone empathetic, articulate, grounded. Someone like you. Elena froze. I'm just a janitor. Charles smiled, faintly. Starting Monday, you're an employee of the foundation. If you'll accept. Adrian looked at his father, astonished. Elena swallowed hard. Why are you doing this? Charles's eyes softened. Because I saw something in you I rarely see in this world, the kind of strength money can't buy, and because I want my son to see what real integrity looks like. Adrian's gaze dropped to the floor, shame and gratitude mixing in his chest. Elena sat in stunned silence, the weight of the offer pressing down on her like a tidal wave. Finally, she whispered, I'll accept, but on one condition. Charles raised a brow. Which is? She turned to Adrian. He apologizes properly, not as a boss, not as a Weston, but as a man who understands what he did. Adrian's throat tightened. He stood, then walked around the desk to face her directly. Elena, he began quietly, I treated you like a prop in a game. I made you feel small because I didn't know how to face my own failures. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry. His voice trembled slightly, but his eyes didn't waver. Elena studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Apology accepted. But deep down, her heart whispered something else. Not yet. Forgiveness was one thing. Forgetting was another. 6. Over the following weeks, everything changed. The Weston Foundation announced the launch of its new community literacy initiative, and to everyone's surprise, its director wasn't a corporate veteran. It was Elena Brooks, a young woman who'd once cleaned the company's floors. The media loved the story. From janitor to executive, the face of redemption at Weston Industries. Investors praised Charles's vision. The public adored the narrative. But behind the polished headlines, a quieter story unfolded. Adrienne visited her office one evening after the foundation's opening event. She stood by the window, overlooking the city, her reflection bathed in amber light. "You've turned this company upside down," he said softly. She glanced over her shoulder. "No, I just reminded it what decency looks like." He smiled faintly. "You remind me, too." For a moment, their eyes met, the kind of silent acknowledgement that needed no words. Then she said, "If you really mean that, use your position for something good. Start fixing what you helped break." Adrienne nodded slowly. "I intend to." As he turned to leave, Elena spoke again. "Adrienne." He looked back. "The thing about redemption," she said, "is that it's not a destination. It's a daily choice." He held her gaze for a long moment, then smiled, genuine this time. "Then I'll keep choosing it." 6 months later, Weston Industries had transformed. The toxic culture that had once thrived in its halls was slowly dissolving under new initiatives, mentorship programs, community outreach, ethical reforms. At the heart of it all was the partnership between the Weston Foundation and its quietly brilliant director. The press still whispered about the mystery woman who changed the air. But Elena ignored the noise. She didn't need the spotlight. Her revenge had already taken form, not through ruin or humiliation, but through transformation. One morning, as she entered the lobby, she noticed a familiar figure waiting by the elevator, Adrienne holding 2 coffees. "For you," he said with a small grin. She raised a brow. "What's this?" "A peace treaty," he said. "And maybe breakfast?" Elena laughed softly, shaking her head. "You really don't give up, do you?" "Not when it comes to things that matter," he said. She studied him for a long moment, then took the cup. "We'll see if you mean that." As the elevator doors closed behind them, their reflections merged in the mirrored glass. The